Wondering if you can tell us where you were and what you were doing.
I was on a very large trip where I had, to visit during 5 days, 10 European cities. And in that particular moment when our show was, I was in Istanbul, and it's not everywhere where the connection was good. So I just physically could not connect with the video and all. But it was a very important meeting, and I was firstly meeting Russian exiled community in Istanbul. That's
Mm.
a very sad story because just 5 months ago, before the war started, you could find a lot of people from the southern regions of Russia, mostly Islamic people, which had to leave Russia because of the pressure from Kremlin. And Turks were always giving them shelter despite all the good relationship with Putin, but they always sheltered them. But in this particular case, I was meeting with Russians. And before that, there was virtually none. And right now, it's a huge community because Turkey is a visa-free country. And a lot of Russians, after the invasion started in February, they preferred to leave the country, and Turkey was one of the most easy destinations for them. So they currently live there, and they created, a political club where I was speaking, and I was pretty positively shocked actually, because usually those Russians who left Russia, they kind of tend to be less radical. So they kind of opposition minded, but at the end of the day, they left Russia preferring not to take the fight and, just to live somewhere and do certain things that they like to do, but somewhere far away from Mr. Putin. And that club that was in Istanbul was very radical. So there were people there who actually applied previously to so-called Free Russia Legion, which is fighting in Ukraine on the Ukrainian side against the invaders. And we were talking, how they can, at the end of the day, get inside Ukraine, receive weapons, and actually start fighting. And many other things like that. So we discussed the political situation in Russia and discussed our future plans. And obviously, I met with those people from North Caucasus, those Muslim community that I was referring to previously. We just 2 weeks before that, and that was, as you know, shortly before we met each other in United States, I was participating in so-called Forum of Free Nations of Russia, which mostly are the representatives of different Russian republics, national republics, ethnic minorities. And they were talking about their right for self-determination, and they don't want to be part of Russian army. And usually they suffer the most because the largest number of recruits into Russian army, which is right now fighting in Ukraine, is coming from that particular territories, and they don't like it at all. So it was kind of circling this and rounding this up, and we were discussing how we can cooperate together and what are the future plans for future Russian government and how we see their rights for self-determination and whether we will be for or against. And I was repeating them that me as an internationalist, as leftists, I'm always for the rights for self-determination, but we should take in mind that currently our enemy is personally Mr. Putin and his regime, so we need to defeat it together. And after that, we need to rewrite the new Russian constitution, rewrite the constitutional layout of the whole country. And maybe they then would decide that they want to stay and they would be happy with what we have designed. Or if they will not, okay, they are up to a legitimate referendum if they want to leave and lead their separate way from that time on, they would be free to do so.
What a concept to have a nation where people want to stay instead of wanting to escape.
Absolutely, that's very important, and Even today in Kiev, there was a convention on the same thing, and obviously a lot of Ukrainians prefer to take the position that let the Russia collapse and let it fall apart, and let it disappear somehow. And I don't believe that that would happen. I believe that the Russian Federation as the state most likely would cease to exist after it would be defeated in this war and after Putin is gone. But there would be something else. And I think that we would reset our nation, and we will recreate a new state, most likely under a different name. Maybe it would be Russian Republic or maybe something else. I don't know what would people of Russia decide by that time. A new flag, a new anthem, a new icon, and new everything, and the new principles how it would be set up. But we need to think about this at this very moment, and again, it has to be the joint decision of all the nations that are living on this territory, and we need to start talking to each other at this moment and not after everything has happened already.
Has anyone thought about writing a book about this?
I don't think so. Maybe you did.
Well, if you're new to the show, I'm going to point over my shoulder to, this is very difficult to do on a camera. This is Ilya's book, Does Putin Have to Die? The story of how Russia becomes a democracy after losing to Ukraine. That when did the book, the text go to the publisher, Ilya? Was it delivered to the publisher? About 24 hours ago?
Yeah, yesterday. And we need to make a birthday present for Mr. Putin. Mr. Putin is about to turn 70 this year on the 7th of October. So I want to make him a present how he's going to die and not meet his 71st birthday, yes.
Yeah. The question is, will he have a 71st birthday? If he makes it to the 70th. So, you just said something really interesting about, and I wanted to talk about this in a larger context too, but you just said, there's people in Ukraine that have this sort of idea that Russia should go away. But, the funny thing is, as people will learn in your book, you're trained as a physicist. And I know enough about physics to know that one of the laws is that you cannot destroy matter. And I think that applies to a nation too. I mean, that land and those people are still going to be there, whether you like them or not, or you like their system of government or not. So it seems to me, and you make the case for this in your book, the smartest thing is as a global community, we can do is help Russia be steered towards being part of the world community and being a democracy instead of being pissed off at them. It doesn't accomplish anything. It's probably destructive instead of constructive.
This matter can be organized differently. It cannot be destroyed, but it can be in different forms.
Yeah.
It can be liquid. It can be in the air. It can freeze. It can take very different forms and shapes. And in one of the form, it may be threatening. And another form, it can be very pleasant, like the water. Yeah. And in one form, it can give life. In another form, it can take life. And that's very important that we design this form together, and we design it in the way that is good for Russians, but which is good for the rest of the world.
I wish we would have this conversation a week ago. It could have appeared in the pages of the book. So there's a second book.
Come on.
There's probably a third to come.
We'll write it in the appendix. The forms of matter, yes.
Yeah, the book is just another form of matter, using ideas to form things. So this actually leads to something I wanted to ask you about that is very much in the news today, and that is the idea that countries, I don't know if any countries have actually done it, but there's a lot of discussion of banning visas for Russians. So in a sense, creating a blockade around the Russian country so that the Russians cannot leave. And on one hand, I think, yeah, that's great and justified. You can say, well, don't take it out on the average Russian, but the average Ukrainian is suffering tremendously. On the other hand, I think about what you just said about, instead of fighting, we should embrace. You didn't exactly use those words, but Russia's going to be there at the end of this conflict. It would be better to embrace them, to fight against them. What is your take on this idea of a Russian ban? Is it a good idea or is it actually counterproductive?
Remember how we were sitting together in Washington, D.C., and you asked me another question, and I answered you both. And you said you hate me for this. And I think that
I don't remember this.
that's actually the case here, because, it very much depends on the nuances and how this idea would be implemented. Because I do believe that the rationale behind this idea is absolutely right. I think that Russians should stay in Russia and fight Putin. And that's the priority. And that's what Vladimir Zelensky meant. Vladimir Zelensky meant that those who are against this regime should take the fight, like Ukrainians are taking the fight. And that it's not fair that many Russians living in Russia, they disapprove Putin, but they kind of say, okay, let Ukrainians fight. And we will, we will deliver them humanitarian aid. We will even create them, I don't know, medicine. We will help the refugees, but fighting, no, we will not do fighting. Let Ukraine do the fight. And I don't think it's fair. And in this sense, I fully support what Zelensky has said. Now, from another side, I think that he should have made one step further. It was just a part of a large interview, so it was just like thrown like this. It was not the main part of the interview. It was just an idea that he dropped, and it created like a nuclear explosion inside the Russian emigration. Yes, and now everybody is blaming me personally because they know that I am Zelensky's advisor on this matter. That was you, because I was always saying that Russia should stay in Russia and fight against Putin. Now we see, whom he is listening to, and we hate you because we will be deported from Europe, and we will get back to Russia, and we will go directly to prison. And it's like you're proposing something like Jews from Germany, that nobody accepted us, and they went to the concentration camps. And that's
not a fair analogy.
Not a fair analogy at all. It's they just disguising many people their inability to take the fight. But what is fair to say is those people who actually took the fight and are really in danger, they definitely should be given a shelter. They definitely should be given an asylum. They definitely should be given a protection. And I even created a dedicated bravery foundation that you generously advertising all the time here on our shows, that is targeted exactly for that. So people who are taking the fight and who need help, we are helping them. Sometimes we're smuggling them across the border, even sometimes illegally. We help them to get protection outside Russia. But you first have to take the fight. You first have to do something. And the absolutely right thing was said by the president of Estonia. And she said that it's not a part of basic human rights to be able to get into Europe. It's a privilege. So you need to earn the privilege. And that's what Vladimir Zelensky meant. Ukraine is ready to help those Russians who are taking the fight. We see them as allies. That's what he was saying. But first take the fight. And by just leaving Russia, you're actually helping Vladimir Putin, because you're actually decreasing number of people who are resisting. And that by the time when we will see a popular uprising, I think that this time is coming closer and closer as we speak and as we do things. By that time, there would be nobody who would be able to go to the streets and actually protest. So we need you guys to stay in Russia. We understand that it's unpleasant, but for Ukrainians, we have missiles coming in. We have shells coming in. We have people dying every day. And you are afraid of just such an unpleasantry as to stay in your own country. That's not fair.
A couple of things that's interesting. One is, in the book, you really make the case over and over again, not just for what you just said, that people who oppose Putin need to stay in Russia to oppose him, but also in the book, there's also in a sense, a call to arms to people who have left, and a lot of people have left. They have to come back and support it as well. I think that's something for another conversation, but I just want to make the point that even the people who have left Russia, in your eyes, they have a responsibility to come back and support it becoming a new Russia, a better Russia, a democracy. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I'm not calling for those Russians who really are in danger
yeah,
of getting into prison by coming back.
yeah,
And of course, I think that the person is more productive when he is free.
yeah,
And if such person is ready to wage an information war against Putin, speak something in the media, or do the same things like supporting Ukrainian refugees, that's perfect. And I admire those people who are doing this, and that definitely we should not deport people who are in immediate danger back home. But
yeah,
those who are just, tourists,
yeah.
no, guys, please, let's do something.
Yeah. And I think people will be surprised when they read your book at how many Russians have left the country and why.
Well,
I don't want to get into that today, but
millions. We're talking
it
millions.
was really eye-opening to me how easy it was for people to leave and why they left. And most of us would have left for the same reason, but now on the edge of change, they need to go back and fight for freedom in their country. That's what Ukraine.
Yeah, no.
When the invasion
That's all.
started, Ukrainians came from all over Europe to come back to their country and fight for their country.
No, at the end of the day, I have so many friends in the United States who were always saying, those Trump, we will leave to Canada. If he comes, I even saw such billboards in California, Canada welcomes you guys, But so how many people left to Canada? No, people took the fight and they changed Trump back, So, yeah, those who like Trump, they're right now fighting to get him back into the office, and that's normal, and not to run away from the problem.
Yes, yes. I want to point out that I put a link in the chat box. Ilya was talking about his foundation that is helping Russians who literally need to be exiled from the country, extracted from the country because they're in danger, because they've been part of the fight. The Bravery Foundation helps remove those people from the country. It also supports people who have jobs in the government, the government, the military, or maybe the propaganda machine, and they're opposed to the war, but they're trapped in those jobs. The Bravery Foundation supports them by taking on their legal fees so that they can leave their jobs. And when people like that who are in those integral positions begin to leave, you begin to erode the infrastructure of the government, the military, and the propaganda machine. So this is we lost you, Ilya. I hope you come back. Anyway, the Bravery Foundation is doing that. And I want to point out that there's a button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen with a dollar sign, or it says pay host. We're not being paid. We're the host. Every dollar we collect goes to the Bravery Foundation. And if you click that link, it's actually a landing page, and you can share that address with your friends and family. Even if they're not joining us here on the show, they can contribute to the Bravery Foundation. So we thank you for doing that. So I want to change. We got the cartoon voice again. We lost you. Yeah, whatever you did before, do it again. I may have to re-invite him. And I'm going to set up this conversation. Let's see. I'm going to uninvite him, and then we'll bring Ilya back if I can. Let's see what happens here. Okay, he's been re-invited. So what I want to ask Ilya about, sort of building on this conversation, and this is a great conversation, I want to ask him about the bombing of Crimea. Oh, there you are. So I want to ask you about the bombing of Crimea.
Yeah. Well, let me just, I will answer that. But I want to just make an illustration for the Bravery Foundation and for what's going on. You remember we were talking about the lady who stood in the live show of the first TV channel with the slogan against the war and everything, and she got arrested, and we helped with their legal defense. And then she left Russia. She started working for Die Welt. But then Russian prosecutors, they start threatening her that they will take away her child from her. her parents' right because they were divorced with her husband, and they started this, and she came back to Russia and started to fight for her child. And I actually employed her on our TV channel. And I faced, a full-scale rebellion inside my own ranks. That's why I'm doing this, because if she was allowed to come back to Russia and not go to prison, that means that she's an FSB agent and will be compromised for doing this. And I had to fight, tremendous resistance in this regard. So she got arrested yesterday, and now she's in prison with a full-scale criminal prosecution. So that's actually, about some brave people who are not afraid and who are doing this, knowing that they can be arrested. And that those people who are not ready themselves to take the fight, they blame others for not being arrested, thinking that they are all agents. But no, you can take the fight, and proper people do take the fight.
And just, just as a little background on her, her first name is Marina, and her last name is
Artenica.
Yeah, and I wish I could put a picture in the chat box. If I showed you a picture of her on the TV, basically she was a producer for the news. I think she would say herself that she, for years, was a member of the propaganda machine. But she was opposed to the war. She didn't want to be part of the propaganda machine anymore. And she literally, as a producer, walked in front of a live camera with a sign that said, "They're lying to you. No war." And now she's in prison as of yesterday. And you helped her get out of the country, but she had to go back to take care of her child.
Yeah, she decided to come back. We were proposing, to try to resolve the situation in a different way, but she was afraid of losing the child. So she took this very brave decision to go back and not sitting quiet, but joining our TV channel. And that, I think, could have provoked the security officers, but she wanted to do it.
Yeah. All right. I want to ask you about the bombing of Crimea by Ukraine. I mean, it's brilliant, right?
Yeah, it's Ukrainians wanted this for a very long time, and they didn't have proper arms to be able to do this. Right now, they say, no, it's our arms. It's not what has been delivered from the United States. Yes. I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's what the Ukrainian military command is saying. But the result of this bombing, because Russian army did not expect this, 13 fighter jets lost, 8
Russian fighter jets.
Right. 13 fighter jets. It was 8 Su-27 and 5 Su-24, 8 helicopters, and a lot of ammunition.
And, the implications of this are huge. One is, if you can destroy that much hardware on the ground, it can no longer do any damage in the air, right? I mean, this is like the most dramatic preemptive strike on their own land. Well,
and psychologically, the networks are full of pictures of Russian people, on the beach, and the whole thing is coming and it's exploding. What the heck is going on? We were in a safe haven, and now we see that we're at war.
So I want to wrap this up.
And you know what Russian military command is doing right now, because those people, they are coming. Because there are no flights right now. They're afraid of letting civilian airplanes. So people are coming by trains or by cars through bridge that Russia has built to connect Crimea with the mainland across the Kerch Strait. And all the time, Ukrainians were saying that they're going to attack that bridge as a symbol of annexation of Crimea. To my mind, we better preserve it because we will use it in future ourselves. But they wanted to attack it just as a symbol. So right now there is an artificial traffic jam on that bridge, which Russian road police is keeping all the time, around the clock. So there would be a traffic jam, so that people actually moving across the bridge will be as a hostage, would be as a live shield for any possible attack on that bridge because they do think that the attack is real.
Yeah. Well, so Russians are getting a sort of taste of what it was like for the refugees in the early days of the invasion. So I want to ask you one last question. Um, feel free to disagree with me on this. I'm speculating. Well, I've never seen you have a problem disagreeing with me. You seem to do fine. In a way, bombing Crimea was kind of a funny thing to do, in the sense that, the West said you can't use our weapons to bomb Russia. So, if you're the Ukrainian, go, okay, well, we won't bomb Russia. We'll just bomb Russians. And I don't know that there were any Russian civilian fatalities.
No, none. No.
I didn't think so. But the question I want to ask is, and we've talked about this before, during this entire period of conflict since the invasion on February 24th, one of the things I think the world has been stunned by is the Ukrainian sense of humor, including, yesterday there was, this military installation and these planes and helicopters get blown up. And I think the Russians, trying to cover their asses, said, oh, someone dropped the lit cigarette. And
Yes.
Ukrainians have gone crazy with this, memes on the internet and jokes and humor and everything. So my question for you is, the Ukrainians elected a president who's a former comedian. Is this humor coming from the top from him, or was it always there? And maybe they were willing to elect a comedian because they were already so funny, it just made sense to them.
Just Ukrainians like the joke. It's a national character. But Russians are not very far behind in this. Usually, they're very much like this. It's just that the possibility to make jokes in this situation of war is very important.
Well, I think you said in a previous week, when your mission is right, you can make humor. When you're wrong, it's just a sad, dark, horrible place to be.
Yeah, and that's what we're witnessing right now. That's what we see right now. The Russians are not making jokes about this, and Ukrainians do.
Yeah, and if Russians were to make jokes, everyone else in the world would see it as such a horrible, horrible statement about the Russian people.
And also, you should have a certain level of intellect to make jokes. Yeah, people with intellect, they don't support this war.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Probably that's it.
We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. I want to point out that, Ilya was talking about hiring Marina, and I can't pronounce her last name, but the woman who stood before the camera for his news channel that's called February Morning. And what it is a news channel that Ilya created immediately after the invasion, starting the next day, so that they could broadcast news, accurate news, to Russians in Russia. And they literally built a studio in a matter of 2 or 3 days and began broadcasting. And you can see a link there where it says Ilya's February Morning YouTube channel. You can go there and see it. One of the best things to do is subscribe on Telegram, because it's in Russian, but on Telegram, you can translate the news into English. And again, I posted a link. If you scroll back up to the Bravery Foundation, I'll repost that as well. Ilya, thanks for being here. I want to thank everybody for joining us.
Very much.